Good morning and welcome to this panel. I'm indeed honored to moderate this panel, and especially after listening to Dr. Kiran Bedi, absolutely very insightful information on inclusivity. India, as you are all aware, is emerging as a digital hub, a digital nation. And what we have got today is a very, very interesting thing that our demographic dividend has actually become a demographic gift to the world. Having said that, it's extremely important for us to harness the power of human resource capital. We have with us a very, very diverse set of panelists today with us, and they are going to share with us the strategy what they have adopted in harnessing this talent, as well as the challenges they face in their respective organizations. So I would now request Shreyasi Singh, the founder and Harappa, Arjit Pal, who is the Executive Director and Head of HR, Nomura Services India, and Sunil Kumar, the President of Henkel India, to briefly introduce themselves. To start with, Tracy, over to you, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for having me, sir, and to the THR Summit as well. Of course, Harappa is essentially, I'm one of the founders of Harappa and the company CEO. And at Harappa, we have focused on bringing to campuses as well as enterprises a range of cognitive, social, and behavioral skills that we feel are very critical. And a large part of the cognitive, social, and behavioral skills do allude to and take off and interact with all the conversations around inclusion, thinking better, creativity, embracing change and resilience. So from that lens, as well as working with lots of learners from the ages of 18 to 45, very, very excited to have this timely conversation on diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Tracy. Arjit, over to you, sir.
Yeah, hi everybody, and good morning. And I'm happy to be a part of this incredible, session really. And it's a great topic. It's a topic of the day, I would say this, and people are talking about it. People are doing lots of activities around it. And in our industry, which I belong to, is the financial industry. It's really a big deal. It's probably the game changer at this point of time. And I'm going to talk about it in this session today, if I get a chance, how we have changed the flow by investing in diversity and inclusivity. As far as I'm concerned, I'm from a small place called Darjeeling, and I'm currently the head of HR for Nomura. I worked across different countries. I spent a couple of years in Japan and got an exposure to a lot of other regions. So have seen diversity at work and how it plays out in regions and countries. So I'll try to bring in some insights around that. And I am a strong, supporter of diversity and inclusivity. And you'll hear more from me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Arjit. Yes, certainly, we would definitely like to hear that, especially the fact that you're coming from Darjeeling, and also the fact that you also worked in Japan. So more about that later. But over to you, Sunny.
Thank you very much, Ashok, and great to be part of this esteemed panel. First and foremost, very much honored. And also a great start of the session by Dr. Kiran Bedi, absolutely amazing. And to build on it and to talk about it from our perspective, I think is a big honor. From introducing myself, I'm Sunil. I'm the president of Henkel India. For everybody's benefit, Henkel is a global German corporation, but and we are 145 years not old, 145 years young, and as an organization. And you can understand, and we are, doing well. Not only, people know us in the adhesives business, but also know us in the beauty care business and also in the laundry and home care business. So we are both in the B2B space as also in the FMCG space. So that is already a big diversity there, if I could sort of, say the way we play globally. Yeah, and I have over 32 years of experience working in different organizations, and a very true believer and very passionate. One of the passionate subjects for me is definitely diversity and inclusion, and very happy to share this and also how we take this forward in a very collaborative manner and part of our purposeful strategy as well at Henkel. And those would be my areas that I would be very happy to share, and would be, really keen to hear other members too. Thank you very much, and back to you, Ashok.
Thank you, Sunil. And it's indeed very, very heartening to note, because our earlier speaker, Madam Kiran Bedi, clearly mentioned that diversity has to start from the top. And it's very apt that you are here representing your organization and talking about diversity and inclusion.
Thank you.
This is basically, since it's a subject of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the question is for all of you. We would like to know, what do you think, or why do you think that diversity, equity, and inclusion is important from the perspective of talent? Why is talent is extremely important, especially from the point of view of innovation and creativity? And what has been your overall strategy to continue to focus on diverse talent? To begin with, we can start with Tracy.
Sure. I think there are many kinds of diversity, and I think it's important to think about that. So what are we trying to aim for? And I think clarity around what an organization from a talent perspective wants to shape its diversity muscle or diversity gene on. You have to be very, very precise about, what you want to do and what makes sense for you. There are some things that we do which are just there's social justice and equity. And I think I'm going beyond that from a talent development perspective. Are you looking for cognitive diversity? And cognitive diversity could be that people are coming from very varied and sort of unlikely career journeys to the point of, the roles that you're getting them for, or the jobs you're getting them for, and might make a lot of sense for a company which is completely trying to innovate new products or whatever. So I think cognitive diversity, sans specializations and things like that, like very strategically mixing that up is very, very important. And then, of course, there are other diversity, which is demographic diversity, right? And not just demographic diversity, but equitable and logical demographic representation, which is across gender, of course, being one. And obviously, it's such an important commitment, at least for me as a woman CEO. I keep saying, and I keep, people in my office keep teasing me, Shreya, you're the 2%, because only 2% of women CEOs in India are women, right? So now I sort of keep, just joking about it. I'm the 2%, and of a population where 50% women are, 50% of the population is women, being the 2%, while it might make me feel great and whatever, but it's a very damning statistic, right? So there is gender diversity. There's age diversity. I think Sunil was talking about the fact that, Henkel is 150 years young, but we're starting to see that people's careers seem like they're over at 40, 50, because there is a sense of ageism in so many things. The startups have that, right? Like if you're not a 26-year-old tech bro, sitting out of a garage, are VCs going to be invested in you? Do you feel like, can you innovate? Mark Twain said youth is wasted on the young, right? And I think why are we disregarding people who can work till 80? And why are companies become better after having lived to 150 years? It shows resilience. Similarly, people who have spent 40, 50 years also show resilience if they're committed to innovating, changing with the time. So then there's age diversity. And what is the age profile of your corporation? Of course, and then there's diversity of other kinds of true minorities, right? I mean, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's whatever. So I think let's be very clear about, in your talent pool, what are some things you commit to doing because you're a responsible corporate citizen, and you cannot turn your eyes against a completely inequitable, unsustainable kind of whatever, which is, at least I think, for gender. And then very meaningfully and carefully for your business, because we're all business leaders as well, and that's an important hat to wear. Think about, in cognitive diversity, who do you mean? I'm a history honors student who did journalism, and that was first one. And now I'm a tech CEO of a VC funded company. I know that the way that I'm building Harappa is very different from somebody else who did computer science at IIT Delhi and did an MBA and was 28-year-old would have done, right? There is something that I add which they could not have added, and that's my specific advantage. And you also need companies run by people like me, as you need companies run by people like them. So I think that kind of diversity in professional experience, cognitive point of view, and demographic diversity are all very, very important when you think about talent, and you have to track it.
Thank you, Stacey. I agree with you, because currently we have 5 generations working, youngsters like you, to old people like me. All of us are working together in the industry to make it an inclusive society. But having said that, even if you look at it recently, there was a recommendation to the Prime Minister to increase even the age, the 60 years which we have in India and in many other countries due to various reasons. That population is currently 10%, likely to go to 20% by 2050. So we can't have, and the aging is becoming more, people are going to live longer. So you can't be having those folks sitting at home and doing nothing, right? We've got to ensure that they're protective. Actually, very, very insightful points, Tracy. Thank you very much for it. We will move on to Sunil. We have a German firm and a Japanese firm. So definitely we would like to hear from both of them. Over to you, Sunil.
Thank you, Ashok, well said, Tracy. I think fantastic points, raised. So from my perspective and from the Henkel side, Wills, I did mention we are, a German headquarters and corporation. What is amazing is that we are 53,000 team members here in Henkel. And you would be amazed to know that almost more than 70% are outside of Germany, or even 75% is working, or people nationalities are also outside of Germany. So I mean, it is not like you are a corporation, but you have believed in this so much that you are able to have more than 75% of your team members literally outside of Germany. To give an idea, the emerging markets, I mean, that all of us are aware, are over 55%. I mean, within this whole block. I mean, so you can understand how much, we truly believe as an organization. And I must, at this stage, very much give credit to, our Henkel, board and, right from the CEO, I mean, our CEO, Carsten Noble, or to the executive committee heads, whether it is, Yander Chorus or Chaba. I mean, so these kind of people started, I mean, thinking about it, right from the top. So when we have diversity ambassadors, and we talked about it earlier, and I think, and I do remember Dr. Bedi also alluded to this very much clearly, saying that how do you do it right from the top, right? Our that it pretty much comes from there, right? So our head of HR, Sylvie Nichols, I mean, I remember she talks about it very passionately, saying that unless otherwise we are not committed to this agenda, we would really not get the real competitive advantage. I mean, at the end of the day. So this is not about just doing it, but I mean, you have to be passionate about it. You need to have a very innate feeling about it when doing this in a very genuine, in a genuine way at the end of the day. So I think, so that are some of my start points. Now, personally, if I come down more closer to, I mean, ground or home and here in India, see, India has always been a very much a diversity celebrating country. I mean, to start with, I mean, whether as a country, every 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, I think the culture changes, the cuisine changes. I mean, the way we, the language changes. So I think we have been, naturally celebrating, diversity, which I think is fantastic. And for me, if I had to just go back very quickly, rewind 30 years back when I started, in early 1990, very first posting that I got, I mean, I come from, place in southern part of India, Chennai, I mean, Bangalore, Chennai. And when I got posted in 1991 to Delhi, I mean, it is, many people would be able to envisage this or not, because today, going from Chennai to Delhi is no big shakes. I mean, you take a flight and go. But early 90, it was not the case. I mean, you had to take maybe a train and you go there for 2 days. It's almost like you're going to New York or whatever, right? So why I bring this example is this started, quite early on. When I got posted and moved to Delhi for the very first time, the way the people I interacted with, the way they embraced me, okay, made a big difference, okay. I could, I mean, learn a lot from, the culture in the northern part of India, how they sort of, look into you, and how they, maybe, you may not even be able to be speaking their language in the same breath, but, they were, absolutely accepting. And they were able to sort of, I mean, ensure that, I mean, you gave your best and things like that. So, it all sort of, I mean, rubs on you. And, it's all about the learning that you pick right from the first, as they say, as to how you accept others. And for me, if I had to sort of summarize how I sort of believe in diversity and inclusion, I would start first with, inclusion. Okay. Inclusion and inclusive leadership is very critical and very important fabric, because that helps you to ensure that, everybody is respected, everybody is valued, and you are able to also appreciate them in a, in the timely way for their contributions that they're doing. So as a leader, if I had to say myself as a summary, I would say inclusive leadership, makes a big difference. And that helps you to sort of ensure that you are able to take the best out of diversity, from all, whether it's team or, knowledge or ethnicity, different forms of, diversity, as we know, and get the best out of the best. I mean, that would be my kind of starting summary, if I could share it that way, Ashok, and back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sunil. I think it's well said that you got to begin with inclusive and inclusive leadership. And as a country, we are anyway diverse. We are also inclusive. Every 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, as you pointed out, you're there. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think Heinkel is spread across, I think, 8 locations in the country, right? So obviously, you must be doing a great job in ensuring harnessing different
Absolutely.
talent from across the length and breadth of the country. Thank you very much, Sunil. Let's move on to Arjit from Nomura. The same question, Arjit, just to understand from your perspective, from Nomura's perspective, as to how you are looking at the talent pool.
Yeah, thank you, Ashok, and thanks, Shreyasri and Sunil. You have practically covered everything, so left nothing really for me. But good definition and good insights into your thought process. I'll try to go outside the country, and that's how I'll try to bring in. I think we are living in a generation where technology has entered every corner of our life, and accessibility, availability, approachability has gone up multifold. So you can't afford not to be a global citizen or global or deliver on global standards. And that's where I think somewhere diversity comes in. Anything you do has to be of the global standard. Below that doesn't work, because you don't know whatever you're delivering is being used in Africa or in America. So and that works very much in our environment, really, because we have got standardized processes. But a disclaimer before I get into my discussion is that anything that I say has got nothing to do with Nomura, and I'll probably avoid talking about Nomura because of my restrictions, but I'll talk more about the industry. And so I think, so when you get an opportunity to work across geographies, and when you work in an environment like ours, you develop a lot of tolerance and understanding for each other. Anything that you do, you look at it from the lens of the West, the East, and the central part of the world. So that, that opens up new avenues of solutioning and answering of queries and issue resolution. So I think that's where diversity plays a strong role. My past experiences in different parts of the world has actually taught me a lot about the very simple thing. A word yes means different in East and means different in West. So in East it can change, in West it's over and out. And then you go to the European continent, it has a different meaning altogether. So I think, but these all add to your, to your personality and your development, and plus, the way you approach problems. So I think our industry has mastered that really, and it has given us a lot of opportunity. But one thing I just wanted to highlight, which I think luckily Shreyasi and Sunil did not touch upon. We tend to get very passionate about diversity. And we tend to get into this myth that it's more of a moral obligation, social obligation, something deeper, meaning we do something for the society, we're uplifting the society. But why it is so underrated and underutilized in a lot of your sectors, it's because we don't connect it with business output. We avoid that. Somewhere, I think we must try to get the connect between the two. Only then, it becomes a strong message. So when you go to a business leader and say that, I need a diverse team, he will obviously want, the output, to understand the output, why. We avoid that, or we probably don't have enough information around that. I think we should focus on that a bit more to really create wonders. In our industry, through the startup fintech zone, we have done amazing things, amazing stuff in the diversity world. So that is one area I think it's not explored much. There was some McKinsey report into 5 years back. After that, nothing really has come out. We talk about stats that this percentage of people in India are women, this people are underprivileged, but what will you do with that population? What is the outcome? What is the final picture? If we can show that picture to our employees and to our senior management, I think the message will be much stronger and the acceptance rate will be much higher, and we'll move in that direction. So I think that's one area we need to explore more, and change our mindset really, because that works in a global environment for anything, any issues really. From an organization perspective, I think, as I said, we should create organizations where people come and feel that they belong to that organization. If they have to search for their identity in the organization, they'll feel like aliens and they'll focus more on that and deliver less. So I think that's one important thing, which again, as you said, it's top-down driven. But I think it's also bottoms up in a way. And what I mean by bottoms up is basically, I think when a person enters an organization, you need to give him a feel of diversity and inclusivity. And even when you grow up in your life, in your childhood, you need to start getting acquainted to diversity and inclusivity. As I was speaking to some other people, that we talk about diversity and inclusivity when we enter corporate life. We hardly discuss this in our student life or your childhood. Why not? Why shouldn't we do that? Who stops us from doing that? So we should start from the beginning, so that we don't have to be pushed into that zone when you reach your corporate life, when you're in corporate role. Because I feel corporates are quite powerful because they have the strength of influencing the society, and if they have to learn from a scratch and start building things, the product will be half-baked. So, and I think you need to bake in check-in points at every life cycle in an organization for employees and everywhere. I think really that how do you see it from a diversity and inclusivity lens, so that it becomes a way of life and a habit type of a thing. So I will get more into details, but I think that's where I can add some more value, and as long as you're aware of your biases, things work out in the right direction. But the business part of it, the number part of it, is very important from a way ahead, I guess. That's my perspective.
Thank you, Arjit. I would 100% agree that we have to look at diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as belonging. It's a very important point. While top-down is important, and what you rightly pointed out, that federated approach also equally works important, because you can't simply have just a top-down. It also has to go down into a federated approach many a times, because only then you will have a sense of belonging to the organization as well as to the country. I think it's a well articulated points, and your other aspect of making it sustainable is very important, because many people don't know the kind of challenges which we have, and organizations have an equal responsibility to ensure that their diversity, equity, and inclusion is also sustainable. It's a very solid points. Now, I would like to start with you again, Arjit, because you mentioned, and I like that thing you said, you're coming from Darjeeling, you worked in Japan and all those things. So one of the things is we are clearly seeing that, especially when it comes to women, we generally hire from tier 1 and tier 2 cities, or bordering tier 2. Not much of hiring is actually happening from a small town and cities, tier 3, tier 4 cities. So I would like to know, and especially in the new norm, the government of India being very, absolutely magnanimous in coming out with work from home policies, right? We can operate from home. So with the new norm of work from home, remote working, all these things is possible. So I would like to know, how have you adopted to, looking at talent from, let's say, tier 3, tier 4 cities or villages into your mainstream? And what are the challenges you are facing in Nomura or from your industry?
You're asking me this question at a very interesting time of history, I guess, where things have just been suddenly changed by COVID. And first of all, I would say, like, our industry mostly hires for potential and less for the credentials. So that's the formula that I also drive with my team and my organization. And I've seen other of my peers doing the same thing. So a question of women or underprivileged or tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 comes later. And these are the biases that come in. But inbuilt structure says that we dive more from a potential perspective. If the person has potential, wherever the person is from doesn't really matter for us. Now, on the practical side of things, I think we operate with human biases. The biases, you may have a structure in your recruitment system where you have all the policies in place, the questions in place, and the do's and don'ts in place, but the person who is going there to interview is biased. And sometimes they're aware of the bias, sometimes they're not aware of the bias, and you have to live with this reality. I mean, even I am biased in a lot of occasions. So as long as I'm aware of it, but you cannot get rid of our biases 100%. So that bias definitely creeps in. And the second part is that the approachability of tier 3, tier 4 at times becomes a challenge. If you're based out of a Bombay type of a situation, or a metro type of situation, because you don't have a branch office there. And I think there is a psychological point also, that a lot of people don't want to come to big cities. They want to stay back in the native cities. But what has happened in the last 1.5 years is that we have tested this model very well to the core. It's that you can work anywhere in the world. You can be in a village and work and still deliver, amazing results. And that's what we are trying to build on right now. This is actually added to our advantage. It's gone very much to our advantage, where we are looking at tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities much more easily, and we are more confident that we'll get the right talent from there. And plus, we have tested out a lot of throughout summer training programs, and it's working out. And there are a lot of those. We have some programs where we work closely with the campuses in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. We have those year-long engagements, which we have recently started, which consist of learning from each other, sharing each other's thoughts, then summer training programs, then hiring, then guest lecture. So there's a continuous learning that happens. We also learn as corporates, and they also learn from us. There's a lot of finesse and shine that's added to them, really, from the tier 3, tier 4 cities. And there are a lot of those finishing schools, which a lot of corporates like ours sponsors to help us bridge the gap between the tier 3, tier 4. But if you ask me, we are very much in favor to move in that direction, because we are looking for talent, and we want the best talent. Our industry has to have the best talent. Not saying that other industries don't need to have the best talent, but and a lot of our people have come. A lot of our top performers are from the tier 3, tier 4 cities of India, who have moved over to different cities and moved up in life. But this is definitely one area which has been added to our basket of prospective hiring candidates, or sources of hiring candidates, and we are really happy about it, because now as long as we are working with the government for the regulations. If the government permits working from anywhere, having a central office in Bombay, then we are home. Then it's going to be a very small world for us, and we can hire from anybody. We'll have diverse talent. The ecosystem is going to expand like anything. So, and this is the same across the world. We are also looking at other regions where we are trying to explore opportunities of people working from anywhere, not really from a London or a New York. It can be anywhere else in the world. So I hope things move in that direction, and we are very open to that. And our industry is very open to that. If you have the potential and the caliber, you can do anything in our industry. That's what I can say.
Thank you, Arjit. Yes, you pointed out that meritocracy is important, and as long as you are removing biases at the time of recruitment, then you can attract the best talent, and you are exploring, the other tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 cities. The policies which has now come in, and work from home is something very exciting. I agree with you that, I think majority of the firms, especially if they're fortunate that they can really make the work from home possible, they are doing it. And towards that direction, I think it's a great initiative from your side, Arjit. And I'm sure, many more companies like yourself will clearly adopt, because we have to ensure that we bridge the so-called digital divide. And this can only happen if corporates actually go and give jobs to where the jobs are required, not, only being confined to the metros. And I think I just love this entire concept of what Nomura is doing. And obviously, you are setting benchmarks for others to emulate. Sunil, I'll move to a next question, which is, we talk about D&I as a competitive advantage, right? How is D&I agenda as a competitive advantage?
Right. Good question there, Ashok. Again, I think we spoke about this earlier, about how do we kind of see this as a big advantage. There are multiple, levels, where you can have examples of shown how this is working as a great example of a competitive advantage. And let me try to connect it with one of our examples which is happening within our own plant, and also maybe some myths, also that general myths. I mean, I'm not saying everybody would broad brush it, but it is important to sort of say that there are sometimes or let's use the word bias. Okay, I think that there are biases. So in one of our factories, I mean, generally the bias is that you have more male-dominated people in the production and operations and things like that. I mean, that's the general view of things, yeah. But we would be amazed. And recently, we were doing a best practice sharing on one of our plants, and we were showcasing 8 women, 1 mission. That is the theme in which we showcase this, where these 8 women are absolutely doing a fabulous jobs in the production area, completely production. I mean, pure production. Working with the machines, ensuring safety, and bringing out some fabulous production numbers. I mean, this is one of our plants here. Again, you mentioned Ashok Tier, maybe 3, 4, maybe, and this is in one of those places. Yeah, I mean, where we, out of our, 7 plants, 8 plants that we have, we have 2 or 3, or maybe even more, which are in tier 3 and tier 4 cities. And these people, I mean, are doing a fabulous job. And why are they doing a fabulous job? I think that is what is more important to answer. Yeah. And we showcase this about what they're doing for the last, 20 years. I mean, it's not a small time. I mean, they just joined yesterday, day before. I mean, for 20 years. They talked about, really, and I'm kind of a spokesman of what they're sharing. But, the environment created at, Henkel made it all possible. This is at the professional level. But also at the personal level, they were able to say that, as a lady, when I used to come into the office or plant and do the operations, I mean, there are many things. I mean, my husband supported, my in-laws supported, okay? And I mean, the whole fabric, I mean, works together, in ensuring that there is a lot of diversity, but also inclusion, which helps to sort of, really build the talent pipeline. Now, here I'm talking about a talent pipeline, which is not the normal kind of a talent pipeline that we talk about, but a very, different pipeline about women in production, and how are you grooming talent in this set of, I mean, people in a tier 3, tier 4 city. So it is all about creating the right environment, giving him the right training. I mean, right from day one, do they know about it? No. I mean, that is definitely not the case. But start trusting them. I mean, start giving them, the things, saying that now that, I mean, you have kind of done the necessary training, I think you could start taking baby steps, into the whole thing. Today, these people are training the new set of people, I mean, who are coming. And they are, I mean, ensuring that, the ambience is completely comfortable for them. You make a mistake, that's okay. I mean, it happens. Even maybe I also did this, when I joined. But it's all about bringing that ambience and culture. And that is what, I mean, I would kind of say right from the start. Now, if you come to, the other side of talent, I mean, when you talk about competitive advantage, one of the things that we do, it could be entry level talent that we take, or people who are already working. We ensure that we strongly believe in this one team culture, and which means that we might be working in different SBUs, that is strategic business units. We might be having different functions, like HR, finance, everything. They are all global verticals, but at the end of the day, all of them will need to have a common agenda of serving the customers, adding value to customers, and adding value to society. So that's the common ground. Now that means on a day-to-day basis, immaterial of everybody's individual KPI or metric, how are you collaboratively working? And that's part of our foundation pillars in our purposeful agenda, to say that if you're not really fostering a collaborative culture, then I mean, you are completely missing out on, I mean, bringing the best of teams. And this itself is a diversity, because if you have to work between, let us say, business, supply chain, operations, HR, finance on a project. I mean, each one of them are already bringing their own, diversity into the plane, domain expertise into their plane, biases into the discussion. But that said, I mean, collaboratively, because you are unified, on this inclusive leadership that I talked about before, that makes it, come out with the best of the best. Which last leaves me with the point saying that uh, I kind of strongly believe also is that there is an underlying maybe emotion which governs this. Is I feel that you need to be very empathetic. I mean, everybody will have to be empathetic. It doesn't matter whether you are the top leadership level, middle leadership level, or you are a starting point of your talent organizer talent frame. Uh, Empathy makes a big difference because you are able to always understand from the other side, other person's point of view about what the idea is being spoken, or why it is kind of maybe difficult, or how you should be doing this differently. If you have that kind of empathy, then you listen better, and then you try to come to mid-ground solutions many a times, which is needed, and that is what kind of gives you the real win-win and a big competitive advantage to make the agenda, whatever that agenda is, I mean, that you want to do, you will be able to achieve this collaboratively together. And some numbers before I end, I think, I mean, I did, read, or we were sharing in many of our things, saying that over almost 19-20%, is what you could, achieve better if you are able to have a diverse team working on, collaborative projects, or on, results at the end of the day, shared by, I think, BCG and Harvard Business, research studies and things like that. That's just some hard edge as well, saying that, okay, there is some great results that one can get out of it. Back to you, Ashok.
Yeah, thank you, Sunil, and very insightful. I agree with you that today's millennial are clearly looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion in firms. One out of the three refuse to join a firm in case they don't have a clear-cut diversity agenda in that organization.
Yes.
And it's very, very interesting to hear from you a manufacturing setup having women. And that's something, which I'm sure the participants would love to hear from you more, because largely we have seen women doing extremely well. They are in the pharmaceutical, they are in the IT, right? They are in, health tech, edutech, right? Fintech, all these areas they are there, but not many in the manufacturing. So it's absolutely wonderful. And it clearly comes out that you are, as you use the word empathy, there is empathy in the entire thing, and obviously ambience in terms of safety, which Dr. Kiran Bedi was mentioning about it. It's a safe working environment. So women are joining, and the environment and the training which you have created. Obviously, you are attracting a lot of talent from tier 3, tier 4 cities in your respective plants. Thank you very much, Sunil, for those insights.
Thank you.
Shreyasi, I have a question for you, because you were talking about cognitive skills and all those things, and especially with this new norm of, work from home and all sort of, we'll be having all talent, right? It will be people from, I would use the word, disabled, that's persons with disability will be there, LGBTIQ, right? Apart from women who have taken breaks are going to join. So the question is, in this thing, have you seen any patterns that you're seeing in terms of, how organizations, because you are, I would say, a startup in the area of education. I'm very keen to understand, with all this flexibility of work and work from home, etc., etc. What is the kind of patterns if you have seen, or is there anything in the new norm which you have observed as to how organizations are doing to nurture the talent, and what is Harappa doing to help harness this very type of talent, right, in this? So as you rightly pointed out, it is the cognitive skills which has to come to the fore, and we have to, while we have to give support them with assistive technology and accessibility in case they have disability, we have to do that. And the RPD Act also clearly mentions that all those things, and assume that is being taken care of. Even then, how are you harnessing the talent? So, Shreyasi, if you have any insights on that, it'd be great.
Sure. And I'd like to just comment on a few things that Arijit and Sunil said. Of course, I think it's great that in tier 2 or tier 3, or even in manufacturing setups, I think the question for diversity is manifold. One, there is an overall representation in your workforce at what levels. But I think the diversity question, even on gender, of course, there are women in the factories, but I think the question is about how many women are there in leadership. And ITITS is actually a great example of that, that the intake is 40% women, but by the time you come to leadership, it's at 7 or 8%, even though it's been such an old industry now by the fact that it's been around for 30-35. So I don't think just representation at one level. I think we're also conflating a few issues and a few trends. I'm not sure yet. It's still not a post-pandemic world. I think we're still very much, and we've started coming back to offices. We're getting double dose. The people who are getting double dose, we did a survey to say, hey, 3 days in office, 2 days at home, and optimizing for individual safety. So you come after you're fully vaccinated, and so on and so forth. Because the workplace, I think we all must understand that the workplace for many of us is the place, it's the most cosmopolitan space that we actually inhabit, where we meet people in our factories, of a factory in somewhere in Maharashtra, as well as go to a meeting in a global headquarter, because the neighborhoods that we live in, the schools that we go to, the extended family that we have is all very much a social economic strata that we can't control. And the workplace as an adult is truly where most cosmopolitan mingling can happen. So I'm not sure yet, and because you're all in the middle of it, how it will pan out. This work from home, great, you can get people from tier 2, tier 3 doing data entry jobs, and of course you don't want to waste expensive Mumbai and Gurgaon real estate on that. That's actually a very business decision and not truly altruistic, that it's adding to the diversity of the team, because true diversity will be messy, right? And true inclusion will be messy. It will have to go beyond tolerance to say you really converge many points of view. So I think there is a lot it will continue to unfurl. And I think, we can't just have some vanity metrics on overall to say whatever, but true diversity is messy. And now to your question, right, about how is Harappa and what are we seeing our clients, our enterprise clients seeking? I feel people who are anyway have an outside in, who are in minorities of whatever kind, right, don't need the diversity training, because they experience the pain or the humiliation or the bias of being on the outside. So their minds are primed to be resilient, to persevere and things like that. It's always in any society, in any workplace, it's the majority that always needs the de-biasing training or the embracing change training, because you've been used to so much. I think organizations have certainly realized, and we get a lot of conversations about cognitive agility, right? Just because, and that's a business, I agree with what Arijit said earlier about the fact is you have to link all of this to business. I do feel like as a corporate citizens, you have some obligations to do the right thing. But I think also as a profit-making force in the world, it is your right to also maximize value for sure. And I think people are understanding, just as the half-life of technology, industries through regulation or through pandemics or whatever changing so much, people have realized how difficult cognitive agility, so learning to learn, right? The one skill that we constantly, our partners are asking us for and want to do is about how do you actually make people learn? How do you make people be more agile? And how do you help people not just manage change, but embrace change, right? And it seems like it's a semantic difference, but it's a very, that you not just survive change, but you thrive in change, right? And I think that layer of this sort of whole thinking, and that's going to come, and in corporate training, when we go to pitch to companies, this sort of the holy grail of ROI on training is something that, all the people managers here, we always talk about, right? And, it's very difficult to immediately be able to put a number and a value to it. But I think beyond that, most people have said, listen, you have to help people learn better, learn faster, learn on their own time, be enthusiastic about learning, that whole spectrum, and then to really be wanting to feel like, hey, now change is here. I will come out of it on the other side, not just having survived it, but being a better person, and the self-confidence that, I or the team can get. So many of us are actually more confident because we've survived a global pandemic, and we should be. And we've learned another way of working. And now we actually work in 3 ways. We all went home for 15 months and there was no option. So you just shut up and stay at home and do whatever you could for your company. Then you started to come back. Then this hybrid is another whole new way. So, there is actually a lot of, and I think we don't understand the process of the cognitive process of unlearning is sometimes as difficult as the process of learning a new skill. And I don't think we pay enough attention to that. Again, the points that were coming up about bias and things like that, to eliminate bias from our minds is a very, very tough process. Sunil was saying about inclusive leadership, right? Tolerance is not going to make you an inclusive leader. It's a genuine commitment to, sort of being able to synthesize and navigate your own biases, your own social conditioning. We're also all products of social conditioning. So we're seeing a lot of these conversations that I would not have imagined having. And because we're an online learning startup, the fact that it's not just at the leadership level, because otherwise a lot of this was the preserve of CXO training, that we only want the leadership teams to be innovative and think outside the box. Now people are saying, listen, give me these solutions on cognitive diversity that I can take at least all through my middle management, right? I think that is a very, very powerful trend. So I think kudos to India Inc. Or I think they've realized that, some of these meta and foundational skills are going to be very, very important, because that's what saved us all of us managing ourselves and managing the change.
Thank you, Stacey. I think it's very, very insightful as to what you mentioned about to basically look at adaptive changes. The concept of unlearning and relearning. Of course, it's a thing which all of us we talk about, and the famous book of Alvin Toffler. The person is literate who unlearns and relearns. I think it's very, very relevant. And you also pointed out the societal aspects of gender parity, or it could be inclusion. It has a direct bearing on organizations. But then we have clearly seen, and many organizations have demonstrated, that if they are inclusive, it actually percolates down into the society. So while we talk about societal norms, having a direct bearing, but believe it or not, organizations like Nomura, like Henkel, and like yourself can make a difference to the society. So we are almost at the end of the hour. I just have one question, and this is basically for our participants and for the audience. How do you define yourself as a DEI practitioner? It could be in one sentence or one word. So Stacey, I would like to start with you.
Walking the talk. I feel like I walk the talk. So that's my idea and I commitment.
Sunil?
I would kind of put it as make sure that people are feeling valued and appreciated timely.
Thank you. And Arjit?
At the risk of a little longer one, I think I believe in equity, which means going a step ahead from equality and offering various levels of support depending upon need to achieve greater fairness of outcomes. Because we need to also understand people come from different circumstances. So we have to bring them to the same level playing field for them to deliver. So I am a proponent of that.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, all three are very interesting thing, and definitely, as what she mentioned, walk the talk, and honestly, all three of you are really walking the talk. And I would like to summarize by telling that the key to growth is inclusivity. And as we looking at a $5 trillion economy, it's extremely important that we have inclusive growth. And in this context, I thought about how the government of India itself has set a new benchmark in inclusive development with the basic values being set around Antyodaya, with a core philosophy being Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Prayas. Thank you very much. All of you have been wonderful, very insightful, and I'm sure I learned a lot. I'm sure the participants out here would have learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Ashok Pavidi, for brilliantly paneling this session, for really moderating it, giving your values and your inputs. And once again, a big thank you to all our panelists. I'd like to thank Ms. Shreyasi Singh, of course, Mr. S. Sunil Kumar, Mr. Arijit Pal Chaudhary. It's been fabulous hearing your thoughts. Like you said, Shreyasi, it's really walking talk, and Mr. Kumar mentioned how it is really about the equity. Valuing your people is what is so very important, and like Mr. Chaudhary said, that it's really keeping them all at pace, making sure that you believe in equality and more. So thank you once again. The key to growth is inclusivity, and that is exactly what we believe in, which is why we bring to you our theme of innovation, diversity, and inclusion for good business. So a lot more happening right here in just a bit. We are about to bring to you a lot many more sessions. To do remember to send in your questions, your thoughts, and we'd love to hear what you think about the sessions on your social media. Do remember to tag us using our hashtag ETVNI. For now, let's get set for our keynote address on celebrating an inclusive and diverse workforce. We'll be joined by Dipali Goenka, Chief Executive Officer and Joint Managing Director, Welspun India.